The desert wind carried the taste of dust and the smell of rusted iron. It whistled across the plains, pulling at the dry grass, as if whispering secrets to anyone bold enough to listen. The sun hung swollen and merciless above the New Mexico sky, where every shadow seemed to hide something that ought never be found. On that blistering afternoon, Caroline Bishop tugged at the reins of her horse, a tall chestnut gelding named Redwing. She had been riding along the dry creek bed that ran parallel to the old Bishop's fence line, her mind heavy with the weight of her father's debts and the whispers of men in town who said her ranch would not last another season. Redwing, usually steady and obedient, suddenly stiffened. His ears pinned back, nostrils flaring wide. He stopped dead before the weather-beaten fence, refusing to move forward. Caroline gave a sharp tug at the reins. "Come on, boy," she muttered. "Ain't nothing but wood and dust." But Redwing reared, slamming his hooves into the dry earth. His body shuddered with fear. His front hoof struck hard against the dirt by the base of the fence post, sending up a spray of powdery soil. He did it again, deliberately, like he wanted her to see. Caroline dismounted, boots crunching against the brittle ground. She patted his neck, trying to calm him, but Redwing's eyes rolled white, fixed on that single patch of earth as though the ground itself breathed menace. The hoofprint lingered. Something beneath the surface seemed wrong, soft earth, darker than the rest. Caroline crouched, her heart knocking in her chest. Against her better judgment, she dug. First with her gloved hands, then with the handle of her knife, scraping soil away from the roots of the post. The first thing she uncovered was a strip of fabric, once red but now darkened by time and dirt. Her throat tightened. She pulled harder. The earth gave way to a brittle hand, pale bones still clinging to scraps of skin and tendon. Caroline stumbled back, bile rising in her throat. A body lay beneath the fence. Her mind spun. Who was it? How long had it been here? And why had no one spoken of it? She forced herself to look again, pushing the soil aside until the outline of a man's form became clear. His shirt was torn, his boots half rotted, but around his neck hung something metallic that caught the sunlight, a sheriff's badge, dulled with age but still unmistakable. Caroline froze. The last sheriff of San Ortez had vanished nearly 10 years ago. Folks said he ran off after a botched arrest, others whispered he was ambushed by bandits. His disappearance was the kind of ghost story mothers told their children at night. But here he was, buried like a secret no one dared to tell. Her pulse hammered in her ears. She stood, brushing the dirt from her hands, and for the first time in years, she felt the desert staring back at her. Behind her, Redwing pawed the ground again, as though urging her to move. The fence stretched for miles, marking land that hadn't been worked in years. Folks avoided it, said it was cursed ground. Now she knew why. But someone had put him there. Someone alive. She climbed back into the saddle, mind racing. If the sheriff was buried here, then whoever killed him had walked free all these years. Worse still, they might still be watching. Caroline rode back into town as shadows lengthened over the plains. The streets of San Ortez were quiet, dust swirling between shuttered windows. A handful of men lingered outside the saloon, their hats pulled low, their voices hushed. She tied Redwing at the hitching post and pushed through the swinging doors. The air smelled of whiskey and sweat. The piano in the corner sat silent, its keys gathering dust. All eyes turned as she entered. She spotted him at once, Elias Crow, the rancher whose land bordered hers, a man with silver in his beard and eyes dark as old coal. His hand tightened around his glass when he saw her. Caroline forced her voice steady. "Sheriff's body is in your fence line." The room went deathly quiet. A glass shattered somewhere in the back. Crow's jaw flexed. "You're mistaken. I saw his badge." A murmur rippled through the men. Some crossed themselves, others shifted uneasily, as though the ghost of the lawman had just walked into the room. Crow leaned forward, his voice low but sharp. "You best hold your tongue, girl. Ain't nothing but bones out there. Leave it buried." But Caroline's blood burned hot. She thought of her father's debts, of the way Crow's men had leaned on her, circling her ranch like vultures. Now she understood. If Crow had killed the sheriff, then maybe he had killed others. Maybe her ranch wasn't dying from bad luck at all. She met his stare without flinching. "You put him there." Chairs scraped. Hands fell to gun belts. Crow rose slowly, towering above her. His voice rumbled like distant thunder. "You don't know what you're saying. Then why's his body under your fence?" For a moment, silence thickened, heavy and suffocating. Then Crow gave a bitter smile. "Sheriff came sniffing where he didn't belong. Just like you." The words dropped like stones. The saloon door creaked, and the men shifted, closing ranks as though waiting for Crow's command. Caroline's hand brushed the butt of her revolver. She could feel the weight of the desert pressing down, every eye watching, every man wondering if tonight would end in blood. Crow's gaze flicked to her holster, then back to her eyes. He didn't draw. Not yet. Instead, he leaned close enough that only she could hear. "Dig too deep, and you'll find more than bones." Her stomach tightened, but she didn't look away. She pushed past him, back into the scorching twilight. Redwing nickered softly, his muscles tense as though he too had heard the threat. That night, Caroline couldn't sleep. The words gnawed at her. Dig too deep. She replayed them until her mind throbbed. If Crow had buried one man, who else had he put under the earth? The next morning, before dawn, she rode back to the fence line with a lantern and a spade. Redwing snorted nervously, but she pressed him on. Her boots struck hard against the dry ground as she began to dig near the sheriff's grave. The earth was stubborn, cracked and dry, but beneath it lay softer soil. Within minutes she struck fabric again, this time a faded calico dress. Her breath caught. She uncovered bones smaller than the sheriff's, a woman's skeleton curled against the roots of the fence post. A ring still clung to one finger. Her hands shook as she covered it back up. More bodies. Her lantern cast long, trembling shadows across the fence. How many posts marked graves? The sound of hooves broke her trance. Caroline dropped the spade, her hand flying to her revolver. A rider emerged from the darkness, Crow himself, his silhouette sharp against the rising dawn. "I warned you," he said, his voice carrying cold across the plain. Caroline leveled her gun. "You killed them." Crow dismounted, slow and deliberate. His boots crushed the dirt where the sheriff lay hidden. He looked at her with something colder than hatred. "I protected this land," he said. "You think law keeps order out here? No. Fear does. They crossed me, they paid. And if you keep digging, so will you." The air thickened. Caroline's finger hovered on the trigger. Crow's hand shifted toward his holster. The desert seemed to hold its breath. Then Redwing screamed, a sound like rage and terror, and lunged forward, knocking Crow off balance. His gun fired wild, the bullet whistling past Caroline's ear. She fired back. Crow staggered, his hand clutching his chest, eyes wide with disbelief. He fell into the dirt beside the graves he had dug, his blood soaking the soil he had used to hide so many others. The silence afterward was unbearable. The desert wind returned, whistling through the fence, carrying away the last echoes of gunfire. Caroline lowered her revolver, her hands trembling. Crow lay dead at her feet, his empire of fear crumbling with him. She buried him there, under the fence where the others slept. But unlike them, she marked his grave with a single post driven deep, a warning to any who dared follow in his shadow. When she rode back into San Ortez, the townsfolk gathered, whispering as she passed. Some looked fearful, others grateful, but all knew the truth now. Crow's reign was over, and the sheriff's ghost could finally rest. Yet Caroline knew the desert kept its secrets. Redwing would never cross that fence line again, and neither would she. For in the Old West, the ground itself remembered every drop of blood spilled, and some fences were built not to keep cattle in, but to keep the dead from telling their stories. And as long as she lived, Caroline Bishop would never forget the day her horse refused to ride past that fence, because he knew what lay buried beneath.